Okay. Hi. So I am Rex from the Animal Science. I'm a PhD student at Dr. Kwong's lab, and I work on mostly stem cell biology. And we can start the interview now.
All right, all right. So I'm gonna ask you questions about lab safety and like lab rules and like how they might compare from like an animal science lab to a computer science lab.
Go.
So the first question I have for you is what do you think about the lack of rule enforcement in labs?
So in a biology lab, yeah, there's basically close to zero lab rule enforcement, but I think that's understandable because every researcher, before they actually go into the lab and start doing the experiments, they are thoroughly trained on all the relevant devices and they are told all of the miscellaneous rules. So basically, every researcher is pretty much prepared to do the experiments safely, and we will always try to stick to the rules.
All right, all right. So why do you think there isn't as much enforcement in labs?
A major reason has to be on the economic perspective. I mean, if you do want to hire someone to enforce the rules, you'll just um, have to spend more and have much less resources to put in your actual research.
Hmm. Um, let's see. Let's see. Can you describe to me the differences and dangers of bringing food and drink into like a computer lab versus a biology lab?
So basically, the major danger I can see if you bring food and drinks into a computer lab is that you might accidentally spill your drink on some electronics and, pro- in the worst case scenario, start a fire. But apart from that, basically nothing. And in a biology lab, you clearly the most dangerous thing that could ever happen is contamination from all of these toxic reagents. So, for example, in biology labs, you almost always have to use DNA dyes to do molecular biology thing, and almost all DNA dyes are somewhat carcinogenic. So you wouldn't want them to contaminate your food and drinks. And also, since basically every lab has to do molecular biology, you will have to use transgenic and also antibiotic resistant bacteria, which would also be bad to be in your food. So if you compare these two different labs, it's pretty clear that a computer lab is much, much safer.
All right. So why do you think computer labs are less strict on food and drink rule? Which you've mentioned it a little bit earlier, but like, what are some more details you can give on why you think computer labs enforce the rules less strictly than other labs?
So clearly, nowadays, a computer lab is basically not so much different from a generic office block. And if I remember correctly, most of these rules for computer labs are there for a historic reason. So basically, in the early days of computer science, the computers are much larger and much fragile and require much more cables. And at that time, many computer labs put their cables underneath the floor. And if you bring food and drinks into the lab and accidentally spill them, they can get in contact with the cables and corrupt the cables, or also start a much larger fire.
Hmm.
But nowadays, these labs are clearly not around anymore, so I can understand why people care much less about the rules in computer labs.
All right, all right. So my final question is is could you describe to me what some dangerous things that know have or could have happened in labs because of food or drink?
So as I mentioned before, probably the most dangerous part is in a biology lab is the molecular biology relevant stuff. So if you want to do the gel electrophoresis, you will have to use a microwave to melt the gels, and it has happened multiple times across many labs that I have witnessed that people use this same microwave to heat up their food as well as a gel, which could potentially contaminate their food.
Hmm. Uh, so would you say say that food and drinks should be left out of labs?
Yeah, they should be, and to be frank, almost every biology researcher wants to make sure they leave their food and drinks out of the lab. Yeah, because they don't want to accidentally poison themselves.
And then lastly, do you also think that think that they should be left out of computer labs?
It's actually much trickier for computer labs. So we can imagine that maybe for a machine learning lab, they'll have much more complex computers, even server rooms, where food and drinks should clearly be prohibited. But if just for a generic computer lab, which is pretty much an office, I don't think bringing food and drinks there would be that much of a hazard.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
And have a good day.
Yep.